Hey everyone, welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast. It is a great day. It is a special day. Is it an exciting day? Because we have the one, the only, John Maitha with us here. John, welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast.
Hey Nick, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am. This is, we were talking about this. I just like talking to you. So I was like, hey, come on the podcast. We might as well record it.
Yeah. I enjoy talking to you as well. Any chance we get to kind of interact together. I mean, we obviously, I have some history together. I just enjoy kind of, being around you. I love talking about, just performance, like nutrition, preparing for combat, training troops, all that stuff. So, happy to be here.
We're going to talk about all that. Very excited. I do want to say, I don't know when this will be released, but, you were so thoughtful and willing to come on here on your birthday. So, happy
thanks.
birthday.
Yeah,
so
well, thanks. Yeah, yeah.
But one of the things I want to, start off with is, John and I were in the 75th together, but talk about, like, your Army story. Okay. I don't know, did you tell that on the 232 podcast?
I don't think I did.
You did.
No, I don't think so. But...
So let's tell it now. Let people know.
Yeah, sure. Well, anyway, I enlisted in the Army in 2002 as a 91 whiskey. That's a 68 whiskey current day. So I was enlisted as a medic in the Army, and went directly from there, kind of to airborne school. Signed up for RIP or RAS-1 now.
And so that's the Ranger Indoctrination Program for everybody, and now it's the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program. Yeah.
One. There's one and two. So, so one's for E5 and below, and then two is E6 and above. So, RAS-1, and then did that. Went to the Special Operations Combat Medic course following that. So that's called SOCM. You get a Whiskey 1 identifier from that, if some people are familiar with that. And then I went to 3rd Ranger Battalion, where I, went to Ranger School. I served primarily in Bravo Company 375 for quite a few years. Deployed multiple times to GWAT, Afghanistan, Iraq, and then I transitioned when I made E6 to Regimental Headquarters Company at the 75th. And that's where I did Force Modernization for 2 years. That's where me and you linked up.
Yes.
Those were good times. Worked in an area called RMED, right? Ranger Medical. I don't actually know what RMED stands for.
Was it Ranger Medical Detachment? Or
is it a detachment?
I think it's a detachment.
I don't know what it is. Yeah. Staff section. And then, and then after that, I went back to 3rd Battalion as a E7. Spent some time there. Then I went to PA school. And then after PA school, I went to 3rd Cab, 3rd ID, and I was a Aeromedical PA for a little over a year. Then I went back to 1st Ranger Battalion as a PA. Was there for about 3.5 years, and then I came down here to San Antonio to train medics. So
nice.
Yeah, that's the nutshell. Yeah.
That's the nutshell. Yeah. When I was thinking about you and like how to describe you, right? There's a saying. What is it? You don't have to get ready if you stay ready. And I think if somebody looked up that saying, your picture would be next to it. Because that was always what I remembered working with you there when you were at the RMED. Whenever there was a physical challenge, like you were ready, like on short notice. Because, remind me, didn't you do Best Medic?
I did. I did Best Medic in 2011 with a guy named... He was a staff sergeant at the time, Staff Sergeant Chris Whitaker. He's a PA now too, and we won that in 2011. So
how much notice did you get that you were doing Best Medic?
So really, it was about 5 days. So anyway, it was Chris Whitaker and another guy who he got injured on a jump kind of right before he was supposed to go. And I remember my first sergeant, he was like, "Hey, we need to find a replacement. Hey, we need to send like our best team." And I was like having a hard time finding somebody to replace him on short notice. And I was telling my first sergeant this, and my first sergeant was like, "You know what?" In a derogatory term, he's like, "You're going." And he's like, "If you don't win, don't come back." And I was like, "All right, Roger, first sergeant." So me and Chris, we linked up, and Chris basically dragged me through the whole thing. So I probably contributed a little bit, but yeah, we worked well together, and yeah, won that competition. It was pretty cool. Yeah, that was a good time.
It was very cool because I remember from like the Army, it was like man, Maitha's going to bed,
Yeah.
on this. I just remember short notice. I was thinking it was like 3 days or whatever. So you had 2 more than I remember, but it was just like he's going on short notice. He hasn't trained up, all like this, and then you just go down there and of course you guys win it, right?
Yeah.
So it's, but that's what I want to dive into is that is what I always remembered with you. Is we would have these physical challenge come up in Ranger Regiment. There was always some sort of event, right? I think back to like the Mogadishu Mile. I found that picture, by the way.
Yeah, that's a great.
The first, I think it was the first Mogadishu Mile.
Yep.
Was at Regiment. It was just Chaplain Struker at the time was just like, hey, we're gonna do it, and so we all like we put together teams in body armor. And we ran, and like you were like, all right. I think it was like last minute notice. We needed a medical team.
Yeah,
it's like grab Maitha, and we did pretty well. And for the record, we were the only team that I think finished, and we did not cross load body armor. If you remember correctly, we finished. What was it, third?
Yeah, we finished third.
But the other 2 teams.
Cross-loaded body armor.
Yeah. When the folks slowed down, I won't name names, but when the folks could not keep up, they took their body armor off and gave it to their fastest person.
There was some conniving.
That was. I'm still a little salty about that.
Yeah.
Took away the win from the medical folks. But yeah, you were always just a gamer. You were always ready. So I want to dive into like, what is your philosophy and what is your approach to training? Like, how do you always stay ready? It seems like.
Yeah, sure. I mean that's a really good question, and I think it's really relevant for everyone, right? It's like, how do you stay ready? So when I was a private in 2003, I just graduated RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program, and there was this guy. His name was, what was his name? I think his name was Sergeant Hickerson, Staff Sergeant Hickerson. And he was just, it's like the private to like RIP TAC like relationship. I just thought he was like this fire breathing, gasoline drinking, barbed wire flossing, just like a machine. Like he could do everything. He was always ready. And so I had a lot of respect for this guy. He probably doesn't even know who I am, right? You know what I mean? But like you have these people in your mind. But anyway, I remember I graduated RIP. And I loaded the bus, and we were like going back to the company or whatever to out process. And he gets up on the bus, and he's like talking about like, how, he's proud of us. He's proud that we did it. He's proud that we got through it. But then he's like I'm proud, but I'm going to tell you the reality. Like today is the day that it actually starts. So you like go through this assessment and selection process. You're tired, you're a little broken, you got bumps and bruises, but he's like, today's the day it starts. And we're all like, what do you mean? And he's like, in the Ranger Regiment, every day is an assessment and selection. Every day you need to wake up and prepare for combat, because if you don't, that's the day you're going to deploy and not be ready. And so what that instilled in me is kind of like this urgency, I guess. It's like, you never know when you're going to be called to do something. Like, you're never going to know, like, when is the critical hour. Somebody's going to look at you and be like, hey, can you do this? Or, hey, I need you to do this. And it's something, you're not prepared for. So I just always try to prepare every day for those situations. And, I think throughout my career, I have been successful. I think I have more failures than successes, but when I look at those failures, I just prepare harder, prepare for them, and hopefully I improve. But yeah, it's like an everyday thing. Like for me, it's like every day, wake up. If I deploy tomorrow, like how would I not be ready? And that's kind of what I think about. So
that's a great mentality, and it's interesting it was set in that culture, because it makes so much sense. As soon as you said that, it clicked with me, because again, I was thinking about having this conversation this morning and thinking back at my time at Regiment, and I do just remember that pressure. Like for instance, like with the Mogadishu Mile, like I think it kind of came up last minute, and I just remember putting on my body armor being like, I can't be the guy that falls out. I can't be the guy that slows us down.
Yeah.
And it was like for every event or every physical task, you felt that like, I don't want to be the slowest. I can't be the weakest link. And so that was instilled at RIP, right, for you?
Yeah, for me, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's kind of cool because, when we talk about fitness and readiness and all this stuff, it's more like a cultural thing, and when you even look back in history, it's like when you look at samurai or you look at any of these like different like masters, of their crafts or trades, like they do it every day. Like that's like what they do. It's part of their life. Because essentially like what you do every day is what defines you. Like, so if you wake up early and work out every day, I mean, like fitness is going to define you because that's what you do every day. But I mean, if you like don't work out every day or if you slack every day, I mean, you're going to be a slacker. I mean, not to sound negative, right?
No,
but
no.
I mean, like what you do every day is what defines you. So,
No.
I mean, if you're late every day, you're a person who's always late. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's interesting to look at it that way. And that's kind of what was instilled in me early on in my career and really reinforced throughout my career. It's like, what you do every day, that's who you are. So
I love that. I wrote that down. I'm putting that in the show notes. The other piece I wanted to talk about, and I didn't kind of give you a warning, but
Sure.
but no, we're talking about fitness, and
absolutely.
no, because you don't brag about yourself. You're a very humble human, but you're one of the only people I know who has a Valor Award at Ranger Regiment as an enlisted and as an officer. And what I kind of wanted to lock in, since we, focusing on fitness though, is the physical requirements of combat. Because I remember talking to, Manny Menendez, who we both like, about how physically taxing it was to evacuate a casualty. And I think people underestimate, the physical requirements of those situations. So you're one of the few people I know who've experienced it at multiple levels. So could you talk a little bit about that, like the physical requirements of combat, and like, is kind of some of the PT you see the Army doing or you've experienced, is that preparing us for that, or are there extra things we should be doing, and what are those things to prepare us for if we're in those sort of situations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's pretty interesting because there's so many different like mission sets, I think, and there's so many different roles and stuff you need to deploy in. But I think if you want to like prepare everybody again for that like critical moment where something catastrophic happens and you need people to respond quickly, effectively, all that stuff, I think you do need to train to a certain standard for that, regardless of what role you're in, how far away, how close you are to the fighting. So combat casualty care, like casualty evacuation, setting up HLZs, all that stuff, I mean, it is extremely physically taxing. And on top of that, it's also stressful, like psychologically. And the only reason I say that is because sometimes it's difficult to like control your heart rate, control your breathing. You lose a lot of fine motor skills when you're stressed, at least what I've seen. Like you'll see it like the shakes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody's super nervous, they'll shake the IV, stuff like that. So, I mean, there's ways to lower your heart rate, control your breathing, stuff like that. But the physical part is, like, I don't think people understand, like, how, so, like, you have to infill, right? Like, so if you're walking, I mean, you have to walk a couple hours, you're carrying a load, then you actually get to the mission, right? So, and then that's physically taxing because it's dynamic, it's, explosive, it's climbing ladders, dragging stuff, moving stuff, whatever, breaking down a door. And then you take the casualty, which you have to drag, you have to put them on the litter, you have to get the litter. The guy who has the litter had to carry it there. So, I mean, there's a lot of little steps that people kind of, I don't think, account for. And then, let's say you evacuate the casualty. It was in a different direction from where you had to go. Then you got to walk all the way back, right? And then But I think the true fitness part that everybody misses is like, that's just one day, right? Or
Yeah.
that's just one incident. Sometimes there's multiple incidents that occur. So, like, yeah, like, let's say you're not in that great a shape. You could probably do that one time, but could you do it 2 times, 3 times? That's, in my experience, where, like, those critical, catastrophic incidents happen. And that kind of wrap into my awards. So it's like you take a casualty, okay, but then you take another casualty incident, then you take a mass cal, then you're almost home, then you take another mass cal, and then, you know, it's not like a 8 to 12 to 24 hour thing. You know, you're at like post 48 hours, and you haven't slept, and you're tired. So when I think about fitness, those are the types of scenarios I'm thinking about. It's not just like, can you drag somebody 25 meters? That's just a garrison requirement. The combat requirement is, can you drag like 50 people, you know, 25 meters? Can you carry litters multiple times? So I think it's a lot of the volume, and it's like, can you do that every day? And that's where I think the fitness comes in. That's kind of where the Army misses the mark on it. Because ACFT, I mean, is great. I mean, like the deadlift's great. Sprint drag carry's great. I want to call it the ball toss, but it's not the doctrinal term. They don't like that. It's, man, what?
The standing power throw.
Standing power throw. Thank
Standing
you.
power throw. Yeah. I got you. I got
People
you.
get upset if
John.
I call it the ball toss.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those things are good, but like, it's definitely just the minimum, and like, you should really like, those need to be integrated into like everything you do, you know, so, or similar to what you do. But yeah, that's where I think the fitness piece comes in. It's the doing it consistently every day. Can you walk 10K every day and do the mission every day, evac a casualty every day, like 3 or 4 days in a row, you know? So.
Right. It's kind of the way it's set up, and I said this before. We set it up so you meet the minimum standards on your best day.
Exactly. Yeah,
right.
Like, it's
the
prime.
Scenario that you're painting is
like,
not your best day.
It's like your worst day.
It's
like,
your worst day.
You haven't slept. You haven't eaten. Like what? Like you ate maybe the main meal out of the MRE, you know, or you're eating like a Snickers bar or something. That's really it. So.
Yeah, you're in a foreign country. Your sleep cycle's off.
Yep.
Right. Completely. Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
all these other factors. So you're probably not at optimal. Right.
Right.
You're 70% maybe?
Yeah, I was going to say like 70, 80%. Yeah.
So can you do that then? And then I love the point you brought up that I totally didn't think about is like, yeah, okay, good job you evacuated that casualty one time. There's 3 more we got to get back. What are you going to do?
Yeah, you got enough juice, you got enough strength to continue on, like, cuz like that's what cuz oftentimes too, you know, I work with initial entry trainees. And they always ask me, like, you know, like, what do I need to do to be physically ready to, like, go to Ranger School or go to RASP or whatever? And I always tell them, just take your best day and minus 15% from that. So if you're, like, borderline on an event on your best day, you're probably going to fail when you go there because, like, you'll get graded. Like, grading is subjective, right? Like, it's subjective. Like, you got to have an extra 10% to account for that. Same thing with like a 5 mile run or something. Like if you're right at the edge, if you didn't sleep well the night before, you didn't drink a lot of water because you're dehydrated. I mean, that's 5 or 10% right there. Like you fail, you know. And I think that's what happens to people, and you know, especially early on in your career, you don't really know your limits. You don't know how you're going to react in certain situations. So that's why I do all these weird things now. They're not weird. I just follow guidelines now because I know, like, if I don't do them, like, you know, I'm going to have a decrease in performance or I won't be ready or something like that.
No, I love the take the 5 to 10%. I would always say, you know, kind of my approach was like, if you wake up sick the day that you're being assessed, can you still meet the minimum standard?
There you go. It's a perfect assessment. Yeah.
Like you're gonna, so you want to train to that extreme. So what are you doing now? So what is your kind of training program?
Okay. So now I'm an officer in charge of a training team for at 68 Whiskey AIT. It's called the Combat Medic Specialist Training Program. And so what we do is so it's a 3-phase program. So one phase is EMTB certification for the medics. The next phase is Fieldcraft, which I do, which basically like we go over tactical combat casualty care, some like limited primary care like sick call medicine, and then we kind of validate them all and that stuff. And then after our phase, there's an 8-day field problem where medics are introduced or familiarized with like prolonged casualty care, and then they do like a 3-day FTX out there as well with it, and that's their kind of like rigorous training event that kind of puts everything together essentially, and then they graduate shortly after that. So I teach TCCC basically and sick call to medics.
So the tactical combat casualty care.
Yeah.
For evacuating a casualty, I know folks come in different sizes.
Yeah.
What would be your kind of number if you were to put it in weight? Like you should be able to drag this much weight. Like if you and again this is John Maitha's opinion,
Sure.
not that of the
Yeah,
DOD or anything. Like what number would you say from your experience?
I'd probably say 300 pounds.
Wow.
I mean, if you think about it, well, if there's a guy who's 200 pounds, which is a pretty normal weight in the Army, I mean, with like full kit, load, all that stuff, you're talking maybe 70 pounds. And then the extra 30 pounds is really like, is it uphill? Is it through sand? Is it wet? Is it muddy? How much weight are you carrying on top of that, right? Because like when, like a lot of times right now in our phase in training, we go over casualty movement, drags, litter carries, stuff like that. But we're not like really dressed or wearing what you would wear in combat. Like we're not carrying ammo. We're not carrying like full aid bags. We're not carrying full body armor. We're not wearing nods on our helmet. We're not carrying extra batteries. All these things add up, right? So really, you're going to be much heavier than you think, and your casualty is going to be much heavier than you expect in training, especially in this environment. Probably like in a force comm unit or something like that, a CTC rotation. That's probably way more similar. So those guys are probably 300 pounds, close. Are they carrying a machine gun? Are they an ammo bearer? Are they carrying charges? There's a lot of different things people can carry. So dragging that person, probably 300.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you bring up the other point of, the weight you're wearing, all the equipment. So like if you think a sprint drag carry is hard, imagine fully kitted out and doing a sprint drag carry.
Like sprint drag carry, you're going backwards, but it's only 90 pounds and you're in tennis shoes. Like just imagine if you're wearing a full uniform, boots, body armor, helmet, night vision, you have a weapon that's actually slung like you can't lose, right? You have ammo. Then you're wearing your aid bag, and then like maybe it's cold outside, so you have a couple extra layers. I mean, it's going to be difficult, I think. And just the resistance from the casualty, like if you don't lift them up enough and do the carry correctly, you're going to have a lot of friction and stuff like that. So it's difficult.
So how do you train for that? How do you train for that mission of evacuating a casualty? What does that look like for you?
So individually, I have like my own like Ranger training program. Well, it's really not my own. So in the Ranger Regiment, and I still use them even though I'm not in anymore. Thankfully, you're a Ranger for life, right? So the Ranger strength and conditioning coaches build programs for individuals to do, and there's 6 of them, and they're like 4 to 5 weeks long. And so I'll rotate through those throughout the year, and then when I'm done with all 6, I just start back at 1. And so it's a combination of, they break it down by high CNS days versus low CNS days. So like high versus low intensity days.
So central nervous system.
Yeah, central nervous system days. And so and then they also have some other stuff they do that I don't really understand. I'll just say it up. But they do stuff with, like, they'll compress you, like, with weights, and then they'll extend you with weights to make you, like, at a certain point in the program, you act like a spring. I don't know what that's called, but, you can see it while you're working out, like, oh, they're compressing me down, and then, like, the next week you do all this extension stuff and you, like, just spring forward. It's actually kind of cool. But it doesn't last very long either. It only lasts that week, and then you're kind of done with it. So I do those, and then every other week with my group of NCOs now, so it's like around 30, we do combat-focused PT. And that's just kind of a general assessment for fitness, and we also do it for team building. So we'll group up in teams, kind of compete against each other, and either have to move litters, certain distances, mile, 2 miles, or we'll do like a Humvee push, or we'll do, hit workouts in body armor, uniform, that type of stuff.
So let me go back to that.
Yeah.
Moving that litter. You said miles, 2 miles.
So what's funny is, like, in combat, I've definitely dragged somebody in a Skedco a mile. I've definitely done that.
Yeah.
But when you say that, like, in certain environments, like, people, like, just don't believe you, and I don't know why.
You've been there.
I've literally done this.
I know what I'm talking about.
And so I convinced people to do it, and it's incredible what happens. So they end up doing it. It takes about 20 minutes, by the way.
Right.
With just the people I work with here, we just did it in 20 minutes. No train up, nothing.
What was on the litter?
Just a 180-pound mannequin. Okay. We put it on a rigid litter. We did a shoulder carry with it, and we just went a mile. It took 20 minutes. Then we did a bunch of burpees and rope climbs and kettlebell stuff afterwards, and then we did like a mystery event, which was an IV, and then But that was like one event we did, and when I said we're gonna carry a casualty a mile, everybody's like, that's
preposterous.
Too far. And it's like, guys, it's gonna be 20 minutes, like, and it was, yeah.
But it's good, they had that response, and then they saw, like, oh, it's 20 minutes, because that's part of the thing with fitness, the benefit that, you get the physical component, but there's a huge psychological component when it comes to that, particularly with warfighters, of showing them, you didn't think you could carry a casualty a mile.
Yeah.
I just showed you it's not that hard. And not only that, you can do some extra stuff afterwards.
Yeah. It's a great point. So, like, training, you should always go harder than in combat. So, and I feel like the Ranger Regiment did a really good job with that. I don't know if that's obvious or not, but I hate to, like, generalize that it's like that. But, most training stuff is much harder physically than what you do in combat. And then...
Or it should be.
I mean, there are a couple instances where I think combat was harder than training for sure. But in general, like a day-to-day combat mission, like just a normal mission, training is always much harder than that. And what's good is you're like, oh, this is easy. I can still hit the gym after this. I can do this again tomorrow, that type of thing. So, it's just a testament. Like, training, it should be very hard. It should be hard most days. I don't train hard every day, but most days of training should be hard. Yeah.
For that, so for your kind of current programming, how many days, if somebody's listening to this, kind of like, hey, I want to train like John Maitha, or is 3 days hard, 2 days, what?
Yeah, so I do.
And I know it cycles, but
yeah. So in general, I do like 3 hard days, and I only do 2 days a week of impact. So I only run 2 days a week, and then and that's actually one of my light days. It's like a zone 2 run. Mm-hmm. But my 3 hard days are like, it's like a lot of weights, so it's like a lot of back squat, like a lot of like cluster squats, a lot of cluster deadlifts, and then and then just a bunch of other kind of stuff like that. Like, what did I do this morning? I did like cluster deadlift to, man, it's like you're on a shorter box, you jump down, and then you jump up real fast to a higher box.
Okay, I got you.
Like depth jump to broad jump or something maybe like that.
Yeah.
So I did a bunch of those, and then I did a bunch of like incline bench. Then I did a circuit that had like my pull stuff in it and posterior chain stuff. And then after that, like the high intensity part of it is actually like getting into like, your zone 4. Sometimes I go zone 5 if I'm feeling good. But
and these are different heart rate zones, just
heart
for
rate
people
zones,
like listening. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I measure my effort is through a heart rate zone. So I wear a heart rate monitor. And so that's how I know if I'm pushing myself or not. So, and so then I'll only do like pure anaerobic for like a couple minutes after that, like 3 days a week. So, whether it's the assault bike, I do Jacob's ladder. I do a lot of like non-impact, like high anaerobic stuff. And it actually makes you run better. Like, I'm like still really good at running, and I don't even run anymore. So like I only run 2 days a week, So
yeah, so you don't need to run it. And then so that's 5 days. What are the other 2? Like weekends you take off?
Saturday I usually do like a long kind of slow run. I just do that for like my mind. That's like when I go to my happy spot. I just think about my week. It just provides me like like mental cognitive relief. Which I think everybody needs to do, for sure, just to like organize thoughts, decompress from the week, find your happiness, whatever it is. And that's part of H2F too, right? So I think everybody should do something like that. It doesn't have to be a run. It could be a bike ride. It could be a walk. It could be a hike, anything like that. But something physical, some sort of physical activity, low intensity, just allows you to kind of be in the present, right? So I think everybody can kind of relate to that. So,
oh, yeah. Exercise, I mean, for me, there's a huge psychological component. Sometimes it's not even physiological in terms of, what I'm trying to get out of it. It's just for my mental well-being, like you say, your happy
absolutely.
place.
Yeah.
You mentioned holistic health and fitness. You've seen that change. You've been in long enough to kind of see that shift. You got any thoughts or things about it or how you've seen it implemented? Because I know down there at 232, it's been kind of at the tip of the spear in some ways in terms of not having resources but still getting after that mission.
Yeah, health and holistic fitness, the H2F stuff, is actually that's not a new concept,
right?
Unfortunately. But I do think the Army's shifting the culture to that, and a lot of like medical care towards that is very good, especially for our especially for our population of people, right? It's mostly young people. They're healthy. They passed a physical to get in the Army or whatever. But I would say it's definitely beneficial. I think it prepares you better for combat. Absolutely. Because, really when I first joined the Army, I was on the tail end of, everybody in the Army is like a cross-country athlete, basically, right?
Yeah.
But then, as, H2F, Thor 3, Ranger Athlete Warrior, all that stuff came out, probably came out 2005 or 6. That's the first time I heard about it.
Ranger Athlete Warrior was first.
Ranger Athlete Warrior was first.
Just let everybody know.
Yep. Yeah,
anyway,
we need to emphasize
Rangers lead
that.
the way.
Yeah,
all right,
Rangers
go
lead
on.
the way. When they first introduced all that stuff and the different assessments and functional movement screens, the FMS stuff, functional movement screens, which is basically you take a test, a movement test to determine to predict if you're going to get injured or not. Not a lot of data that ended up supporting it, but still it was really cool to do. But so that really I think prepared me well for what I experienced in combat. And so now I'm glad the Army's doing it here. As for the 232 stuff, That's a great program that works down there. And basically, what that was that started with Lieutenant Colonel Menendez. It was kind of like a commander's initiative to figure out how to implement H2F with minimal resources. And so they did a great job with that. They figured out the personnel, the equipment stuff down there. And, I do think it has meaning to soldiers. Like, it's great to take care of people, but obviously we also want to capture people that wouldn't make it to, like, get into the Army as well. And I think it also does that, which is great. So, we maintain a higher percentage of our population due to, that would have been lost to health reasons. So I think it is making people healthier. And again, that's an everyday thing that they do. They do it every day. And it's a cultural thing, so you come into 232, you get briefed about Gladiator. If you're on a profile for any reason, you get into the program and they really look at you. They try to make you better. And really it's just the whole purpose of it is just to make you better. So, and I don't think anybody can disagree with that not being good. So
no, and
great. Yeah.
And I know there's some challenges, and I do want to say this because you're here, you as my witness, because I've talked to some dietitians out there in H2F, some young dietitians,
okay.
And they talk about the challenges they face and different things, and sometimes they point to those special operations setups where they're like, beautiful gyms, beautiful facilities, and look at that. And I have to remind them, and sometimes I don't know if they believe me. I was like, when I got to Ranger Regiment, we were 4 individuals sharing an office. I actually shared a computer with Matt Wilson. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah.
So I was like, and we got made fun of a lot.
Yeah.
And people weren't ready. It was a culture change. It took time. It took, to what it is now.
Yeah.
So H2F is no different.
Yeah.
And so if you're in one of those units, you're listening to this and you're struggling and people are, just understand,
It'll
were
happen.
there, you remember.
It'll happen, yeah.
I mean, Raw wasn't embraced with open arms initially.
It definitely wasn't. There was like incredible denial and avoidance, and you just try to discredit it and devalue it. And now it's like one of the main things it's one of the main programs of the Ranger Regiment. And I mean, the Ranger Regiment's trying to take it even further and make it more fully comprehensive. Which is the direction a lot of this stuff is going, because like you say, you talk to dietitians and stuff, so it's more than just PT. It's also nutrition, it's also sleep, it's also mental well-being, it's cognitive, it's psychological, like you were saying with the working out and stuff. So I mean, all those things play a factor into performance, and you want to perform when it matters. I mean, you gotta take each one of those little domains, somewhat seriously, at least invest a little bit in each one of them. So,
yeah, and you speak about the cognitive piece, and I want to ask you about this because I don't think I've ever seen you flustered. you don't get flustered, and especially in those high stress environments you've been in.
Yeah.
How do you have a practice, or are you naturally wired that way, or is that something that you've developed over time, and if so, how?
So I always go back to when I think about that, because I've been asked that before, and I feel like I never have a good answer for it. Maybe I'm just wired this way, But when I go back, so then I'm like, well, is that really true? Because I don't think I'm really that different from other people. Like what I do, like anybody can do it. I mean, there's nothing special about it. It's literally just the basic fundamentals, right? That's all I'm doing. So I mean, anybody can do that. So I always go back to the original, the first casualty I ever took, right? And I go back in time. It was in 2005. I was at E5 at the time. I was in 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, 3rd Ranger Battalion. And I remember I didn't have a radio at the time because medics didn't have radios. I didn't have an inhibitor. But one of the weapons squad leaders, he was like, hey, Maitha, they took a casualty up there. They need you. And I was like, oh, I'm like, this is it. This is it, right? was like my first one, and I remember like my heart's like, and I'm like, you know, starting to breathe fast, and I'm like, all right, I'm like getting super amped up, and so I'm running, you know, I run maybe 5 or 10 minutes as fast as I can. You know, I kind of know where we're going, but I'm following a guy in front of me. He's like, don't go this way, we're going this way. You know, there's like some mild contact or troops in contact, enemy fire.
Sorry. Yeah, just so for the young soldier to understand it. So John's getting shot at while he's doing this. He's trying to say that.
Well,
it probably wasn't
people
close,
are getting
but
shot like
around
you,
okay,
right? But it's not like at you. There's a difference too.
Yeah.
People will figure it out later, but yeah. But so I'm not like actually getting shot at, but there's like contact around me. So we're trying to avoid that. So I run up to this guy, and I just remember everything at that point was just algorithmic. Because I had done a trauma assessment, you know, dry 1,000 times, and then I'd done a trauma assessment on like a moulaged or simulated casualty 1,000 times, and then I remember looking at the casualty. I was surprised. Well, he was Iraqi. He was like a local national, and I was just surprised at how young he looked. Like, I think he was like maybe 17 or 18. It's hard to tell kind of over there sometimes, but like he was young. Like he was like a little bit younger than me. I was like, oh, I was surprised. But then I saw the bleeding, and I was like, trauma assessment, going into it. You know, I did all my stuff, treated him. He had some pretty severe wounds, but you know, figured it out, controlled all that stuff. Did a crike, did some procedures like that and stuff like that, or a surgical airway. And so, but yeah, like I never really felt flustered because, like, I think I was flustered initially, and then once I started it, my training, my repetition, all that stuff, it totally worked. And from that moment on, I was a believer in training. Like after that incident, I was like, man, I can't believe I did all that. Like,
because how old are you? Let's frame it.
Because I'm like
in that
20. How old would I have been? I was 23 or 22.
23-year-old.
Yeah, I was
in a
I was
foreign.
1980. So that's 2005. Yeah, I was 22.
22 years old.
I was just 22.
Some of that, yeah. So just barely legal in a foreign country in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Doing a surgical airway.
Yep. Under
NVGs.
I used the light from the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
Matter.
Yeah, but now I'm my NVGs. We had PVS 14s at the time. I looked like Mr. Peanut out there, with monocle, you know, just flipped it up out of the way, and I'm like, you know, trying to look. I think I made a little.
While troops are in contact.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, kind
of. There was gunfire going on.
Different ways. Yeah, it was in like a little street corner. I remember. Yeah, it was. Yeah, he was shot like left subclavian, went up into his neck. I remember cutting through his throat, and I felt the round. It was lodged in there. He had like massive hematoma on the side, like expanding, like blood under the skin. But yeah, I mean, but yeah, again, like so, we had infilled that night, did the mission. We had ran back from a large vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, like on a car, blew that up, ran back. You know, this incident happens, then I run to that, and then we still have to evac them, then we exfil out of there. So again, I mean, it's like, it's not just the event, right? It's like, how many times can you do that event for the ACFT or the APFT, whatever it is you're talking about. So
no, and you said something, that I want to kind of hit back to that, because with, you know, different conflicts drawing down, the hope, I think, is this wisdom, like folks like you and others who've seen it, you know, what combat, how challenging it can be is lost. So the young know, like, hey, this could be coming. Like, this is what you're getting ready for. Was, you know, for those Iraq missions, I just deployed with Rangers to Iraq one time. I was with a cache the other. But just the op tempo, could you talk about how many missions were you running during a deployment?
Well, it depends.
Okay, yeah.
And
You can give a range, but
So
I just
some
remember you guys
people-
being out all the time.
Yeah. So some people, and also the time period, I think,
Right.
defines it too. But in general, from what I remember, especially when I was like at the company level and stuff, I mean, you would really do like 90 to 100 probably, I would say.
So, I mean, we're looking at. So you just explain that scenario that you went through that night. That was one
Yeah.
mission.
That was just one mission.
So people can understand. You went out that next night,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you had another mission,
Then you went out the next night.
and then
after
you went
that.
out the next night, and you had another mission.
And then we took more casualties that deployment, American and local nationals. So, I mean, it's not like you do it one time and you're like done. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. It's like, you're going to have to do this like 10 times, and you're struggling doing it once. That's why we don't think you're like able to move on. Because like a lot of people are like, well, I can do that. And it's like, well, you can barely do it. And they're like, that still counts. And it's like, well, you don't understand the larger concept. We want you to do this 10 times. Or we want to send you to your unit, like in wherever it is, like ready to do this at least half the times or, whatever. So yeah, it's a lot about repetition.
And that's why I was so excited to have you on to talk about this, because I don't think, some of the younger generation understand the physical requirements that how taxing it can be, or
Yeah.
how it can become very quickly.
Yeah, it can become very taxing very quickly. A lot of high heart rate stuff, I think. So I mean, yeah, you just got to train for like high intensity, high capacity things, because like you don't want to be the guy who falls out of the group during the run, for the Mogadishu Mile or whatever. But the same thing, it's like when you're, let's say you're evacing a casualty with a team, so that's 4 people, and you have a team leader pulling security, and you're under fire, and you're going a mile with a casualty. I mean, you don't want the guy to die either, right? So like so it's not about falling out. It's about like, can we get this guy out of here in time to save his life? I mean, that is also stressful. And I don't know if anybody will be faced with the same situation I was, but when I was faced with that situation, I knew it's like, well, I need to prepare every day for this. Like, I need to make sure I can do this type of thing. And then that's kind of how my philosophy developed, I think. So.
No, that's powerful, and thank you for sharing that, because hopefully folks listening to that, if there's anybody out there that was on the fence with training who said, one more repetition, I can't do it, I'm sick of doing these dry runs, etc., listen to you, and it's like, no, yeah. That's the difference. That's the difference.
The dry runs matter, and you look at some other kind of professional organizations in the Army, just with like certain skills, like I know marksmanship's an easy analogy, but people like take dry fire, like they take that very seriously. They take dry runs very seriously. That crawl, walk, run methodology, like a lot of people blow through the crawl and the walk phases, and then they go to the run phases and make all these mistakes. Because they don't really emphasize like crawling, so because it's so boring and redundant, but it's just it's just as important as the run phase to do correctly, So yeah.
One of the things before we get out of here, I wanted to talk about is the extreme though. Can you obviously with not giving too much detail. The most physically challenging mission you've ever been on. Could you paint that picture for folks to kind of, and if there's two that are a toss up, tell them both, because that's the other piece of like, hey, this is the physical requirement that most probably listening to this aren't ready for.
So that's interesting. The 2 most physically challenging.
Yeah. Or if there's one that just stands out, whatever And for different, if it's for different reasons, you can share that. But like ones where you're like, I was smoked, I was done. Or was there ever a mission you were on physically where you're like, can I get through this? Can I?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess. I think there was a mission where we walked about, I think it was like 26K.
Woo! Where?
Or maybe 20. It was in northern Afghanistan. So
yeah, look at that terrain, people. Google that terrain.
So you have ridge lines,
Yeah.
mountains, wadis, that type of thing. So you walk out, but I mean, you're also like doing the mission, like you're still like assaulting, right, or conducting a platoon.
So it was 26K to get to the fight.
Yeah, so it's 26K there and back, and then I don't know if that counts the distance in between. And then, but it was like, night into day. So you're taking some pop shots too on the way out. Not the whole time, but a little bit of the time. And it's a lot of stopping and going. It's not like you're getting in your rhythm,
Right.
I think that's also part of it too. Like, a 12-mile road march, like, you hit your stride and you're going and, you're bouncing, singing your songs or listening to unauthorized music, right? Something like that. But there it's like a stop, go, take a knee, go around, go see somebody, walk again. So it's a lot of that. I think that's physically taxing.
Oh yeah, getting up, getting down with that load.
Getting down with a load, and then you're walking 26K. I remember we got back to the FOB after it, and they gave us like these like hot dogs or sausages or something.
Good recovery fuel.
And I was just like scarfing it down, and I was like, hey, can I get another one? And they were like, that was the last of the food we had. And I was like, oh. And so I think I ate part of like an MR. So I ate like an MRE too or whatever.
Yeah.
Then I like just passed out on some rocks. And then the other time, so that was like just walking. That was physically challenging, I thought. Some other people definitely were about to fall out. The other time is one of my more recent ones, but I was so I did a mission that was like over 2 days, and I didn't really sleep. And there was like multiple casualty incidents like along the way over those 2 days. And I just remember at the end of that, physically I wasn't exhausted, but just like mentally, like cognitively, like I was just like done. Like I couldn't like concentrate, like I couldn't even like talk to people. Like I just needed to like go off in the distance. And I just remember sleeping like long, like 14 hours or something after that. Like I was just exhausted. But so yeah, one's like physical, and the other one's like I was just awake for so long.
How did you stay awake for 2 days? Did you use caffeinated gum?
I drank a lot of Rippets. I drank a lot of Rippets. That's what I did. I tried not to go over. Man, how many did I drink? I'm trying to think. I drank more than a couple.
Yeah, Operation. But this is the extremes, people. We're not encouraging to drink energy drinks. But this
I took like a little nap maybe in between. Yeah. But like you wake up, it's like sunny outside. Like it's impossible to sleep sometimes. So, but eventually you get tired enough and you just sleep anyway.
You're just gonna crash.
Yeah, but yeah, I did a lot of Rippets. So that was my go-to.
You got to get the caffeine some way.
Yeah.
No, I think that's good, and thanks for sharing that. Just to kind of, because that's what I wanted to do today. I wanted to paint those extremes because I've had the conversations with Lieutenant Colonel Manny Menendez and about that his casualty evacuation story. Maybe I can get him on sometime to talk about it. But just how physically taxing that is, and I'm like I don't think people think about this. Like this could be it. This could be. So when you're doing that sprint drag carry and you come in and smoke and they're smoked and they collapse, we're like, okay, could you rest a minute and go do another one?
Yes.
Could you? And then another one, and then another one, and then another one. And that's kind of, even if you're not being assessed to that, currently through the ACFT, like that's what you need to be thinking about.
That's how you should be training. So like the ACFT is like, can you just do it? And then training should be like, well, can you do this 5 times? Can you do this for 5 casualties?
Yeah, can you do it with a 300-pound casualty?
Can you do it with a 300-pound casualty? Mm-hmm.
No. That's awesome. John, thanks so much for sharing. That was, I always enjoy talking to you, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and experience as nearly a 40-year-old coming up.
It's true. Thanks for having me. I had a great time. I always love talking to you. So
yeah, we'll have to do this again.
Yeah.
So that's it for this episode. Hopefully you took notes. A lot of lessons learned to be had. So subscribe, sign up wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll have more great content coming for you.